On today's edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the UFC Fight Night main event, July 1st, Sean Strickland, Abus Magomedov. Let's get into it. If you've never watched a show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles, and then I'm going to give you my pick at the end. Some of this stuff may have relevance, it may not. I'm going to look at every little angle of this fight, and like I said, I'll give you my pick at the end. Just a quick tale of the tape between this fight. Sean Strickland, 26-5, Abus Magomedov, 25-4-1, 32 years old for Strickland, 32 years old for Abus, 6'1" to 6'2", 76-inch reach compared to 78. Let's start first with Sean Strickland, who we've seen in main events a few times here. And let's talk about him a little bit. This fight is 5 rounds. Forgot to mention that as well. It's going to be taking place at the Apex, so smaller cage, more susceptible to knockouts. We'll see if that plays a role in this fight. Sean Strickland, I mentioned it there, 26-5. He's got 10 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 12 decisions. He's 32 years old. Just turned 32 back in February. He is 6'1" with a 76-inch reach, like I mentioned. So he's only 1 year younger than Abus in this fight. I know they're both 32 now, but Abus is going to be turning 33 here pretty soon. I'll mention that a bit later. Sean Strickland is a BJJ black belt. He trains out of Extreme Couture. He's the former King of the Cage middleweight champion. King of the Cage being a regional promotion that's been around forever. He's only got performance of the night one time, and that was against Brendan Allen, a fight where he finished Allen in a win that has aged quite well considering what Allen has been able to do his last couple of fights. Sean Strickland did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in 2008, March of 2008. Made his UFC debut in March of 2014, not November. Getting my dates mixed up here. Sean Strickland has a 13-5 UFC record. He's got 4 stoppage victories. Some notable wins include Brendan Allen, Uriah Hall, Jack Hermanson, and Nasruddin Imavov, who he defeated in his last fight. Some notable losses include Santiago Ponzinibbio. That was at welterweight, and that was in his just 3rd UFC fight. Kamaru Usman, I'm not going to count Zaleski, although I think he was ranked at the time, or at least close to the rankings. And then obviously the 2 most notable losses he's had, Alex Pereira and Jared Cannonier. Sean Strickland has had a number of layoffs in his career. Let's go through those. Going from Luke Barnett to Ponzinibbio, there's a 267-day layoff. I can't even speak here today. Going from Tom Breeze to Kamaru Usman, there's a 308-day layoff, and probably the most notable one was the motorcycle accident he had. Going from Nordine Taleb to Jack Marshall, and of course there was the motorcycle accident in between there. There was a 735-day layoff in between there. Since the motorcycle accident, though, since his move up to middleweight, Strickland's been pretty active here. You see 2 fights in 2020, 2 fights in 2021, 3 fights in 2022, and then he'll have a second fight this year, fighting Imavov earlier this year. I mentioned the injuries. Actually forgot he was supposed to fight Tim Means back in 2016. He had a knee injury there. And then I mentioned it there, December 2018, Strickland was hit by a car while he was riding his motorcycle in Los Angeles, rendering him unconscious. He suffered numerous injuries and needed a knee operation after the accident. So there was that. And then just the only other injury, which was very minor, supposed to fight Jared Cannonier at the UFC Fight Night card in October of 2022, had a finger infection. So that took him out of it too, but not really an injury, more of a health thing there as well. Strickland's had a couple close fights. I've talked about this before. The fight he got, the split decision win over Luke Barnett. Went back and looked at the scorecards for that one, and that, of course, is on MMADecisions.com. That was at UFC Fight Night 41 in May of 2014. 11 media members scored the fight for Luke Barnett. 0 media members scoring the fight for Sean Strickland. So that's a fight he probably didn't deserve to win. The Tom Breeze fight, that was also a split decision, UFC 199, June of 2016. 12 media members scored the fight for Strickland. 1 scored it at a draw, and 9 scored it for Tom Breeze in that fight. And then perhaps one that, people thought could have gone the other way. The split decision loss to Jared Cannonier. Went back and looked at the scorecards for that. That was back in December of last year. 13 media members scored the fight for Cannonier. 7 scored it for Strickland. I personally thought Jared Cannonier won that fight, but that might be one I want to rewatch. And then here's a couple quick stats here for you on Sean Strickland. You can see there his significant strikes landed per minute is 5.76. It's actually pretty high. You don't see striking like that in the 5s usually too often, so that's pretty impressive. His striking accuracy is only 41% though, meaning he doesn't actually hit a lot. And then his striking defense is at 63%, meaning he doesn't get hit a ton. And his takedown defense is at 85%. We'll see if Abus tries for a takedown, I'm not sure. And his takedown average is 1.04. So I've said this before, Sean Strickland, a pretty well-rounded fighter, doesn't really excel in any particular area, but he's one of those, well-rounded guys in the middleweight division. So that's everything you need to know about Sean Strickland. I'm still trying to work on an interview with him. We'll see if I get him, but it's not looking very good. Okay, let's get to his opponent, Abus Magomedov. Of course, I've talked about this fight at length. with Abus and Strickland. Don't need to talk about, who deserves what or whatever. We're just focusing on my preview and pick for this one. So you can see there, Abus Magomedov, 25-4-1. He's got 14 knockouts, 6 submissions, and 7 decisions. He's not ranked at middleweight, which makes sense because he only has one UFC fight. I mentioned it there. He's 32 years old, going to be turning 33 in September. He's 6'2" with a 78-inch reach, so he'll have a 1-inch height and 2-inch reach advantage in this fight. Trains out of the UFD gym in Germany. That's where he's training. I believe he spent a bit of time training in Vegas as well. Don't think him and Strickland have trained together ever, but mainly training out there in Germany. Born in Dagestan, trains and has been fighting out of Germany as well. Like his opponent, Sean Strickland, Abus Magomedov did not have an amateur debut, went straight to the pros in February of 2010. Strickland at that point already had 4 professional fights, made his UFC debut in September. Was actually supposed to make it sooner. He was actually supposed to make his UFC debut in 2021. Doesn't end up happening. We'll talk about why that is in a sec. So he's only got the one UFC fight. It was last September. Sean Strickland had 16 UFC fights at that point. I'm not even kidding. That's how many fights that's how long Sean Strickland's been in the UFC. And Abus, like I said, just made his debut last year. So Strickland's had 16 UFC fights by the time that he fought Dustin Stolfus. Like I mentioned it there, he is Abus Magomedov is 1-0 in the UFC. He's got 1 stoppage. It was a 19-second victory. He doesn't have any notable wins. Sorry, Dustin Stolfus is not a notable win. Dustin Stolfus is, we'll talk about him in a sec, but Dustin Stolfus, not really a notable UFC fighter, and obviously he doesn't have any losses because he just got the 1 fight. Okay, I wanted something I don't normally do on here, but I want to talk about it because we just don't have a lot to work with Abus Magomedov's MMA or UFC career. Is I wanted to talk about his run in PFL because people always bring that up as, hey, he was a finalist, that's got to count for something, as far as what he was able to accomplish. So you can see the resume there, right there. So let's talk about the Danilo Villafort fight. And I will mention as well, one other win I'll mention that he had on his resume, which was good very on, Jesse Narini. That was a UFC vet. That was a good win at the time too, and that was when he was 7-0. But let's talk about PFL because I think that's what a lot of people have argued on the Abus side as to him deserving this fight. He was a PFL finalist. He should be getting a big matchup here. So he fights Danilo Villafort. A+ performance, gets a first-round finish in there. Went back and looked here. Abus, defeated him in the first round, like I mentioned. That was PFL 3. That was back in July of 2018. Danilo Villafort was 38 at the time. He had a 2-year layoff going into the fight, and Danilo Villafort as well was 2-2 in his last 4 fights. Not exactly a great win here. Now, granted, one of those losses was to David Branch, who's we've seen, in the UFC is actually a pretty good fighter here, but you look at it there, fought in 2011, fought in 2013, and then didn't fight again until 2016, and then fights Abus in 2018. So a bit of a layoff going into this one. Not exactly a quality win, but hey, it doesn't matter. You got it done in the very first round. Okay, the next fight, Anderson Goncalves, who's 11-2 at the time of fighting him. We did have betting odds for that fight. So we didn't have betting odds for some reason on the Villafort fight, but we had betting odds on the Goncalves fight. You know how big of a favorite he was going into that fight? He was -490. That's what the line closed as. So I think that's a key thing here. He was supposed to win this fight. It wasn't really much of a fair fight, so to speak, going into it. Goncalves was 34 years old at the time of this fight, as you can see. He was 31 at the time, I guess, when he fought him. And then he was coming off a TKO loss in that fight as well, coming into the fight here. So Goncalves, you just look at it here. He was coming off a loss to Lewis Taylor, where he was finished in the 3rd round as well. So, it's not like he was coming in with a lot of momentum. But yeah, Goncalves, a decent opponent there, 11-2. Got to mention that. Okay, then he fights Gaston, not even going to bother butchering the last name there, but Umatalov. Fights him to a majority decision draw in that fight, which we see a lot of draws in PFL. It does happen with the format. Abus was a -900 favorite going into that fight. So that means you'd have to bet $900 to win $100 in that fight. That was a fight that ended in a majority decision draw. As far as when that fight took place, you can see Umatalov was 35 years old at the time. He was 1-2 in the UFC prior to going to the PFL. He lost to Neil Magny and a couple other fighters, another fighter there. And then just 2 fights prior to that, Gaston was upset by John Howard. So it's not like, again, this is a guy that was, really making a lot of noise here. And then he beat Eddie Gordon prior to that. I don't think Gordon was in the PFL that much longer. So he lost to Cathal Pendred and Neil Magny in the UFC. So kind of what I'm getting at here, not a great opponent. Obviously, the odds makers felt like Abus was going to win that. That was -900. The best win that Abus has had in his career was actually in the fight that got him into the PFL finals, which was against Sabu Sai. I think I'm butchering that, but obviously we know he won the PFL tournament a few years later. That was a unanimous decision win. Very good win there. That's a fight that has aged quite well. And He was 31 at the time, and he was 7-3-1 going into that fight. So that was a good win. That's probably the best win that he's had going into this. But then the part that people leave out about Abus being a PFL finalist, he fought Lewis Taylor in the PFL finals. And look, I think Lewis Taylor is an extremely underrated fighter. There's a whole story about how the UFC signed him and then took away the fight and all that different stuff. But Lewis Taylor knocked him out in 33 seconds. Now, look, fights are going to happen. You're going to have, upsets and all that. And by the way, Lewis Taylor was a big underdog going into this one. Abus was minus 333 on the scorecards, but it's not a good look. Lewis Taylor knocks him out. Lewis Taylor was 39 at the time. I know people get caught. We can just chalk it up to that, but still, that's something that people leave out when they talk about how great Abus is. So I'm only pointing all this out because there's a lot of talk about how, well, this guy's extremely talented and all this stuff coming over from the PFL. A lot of the wins haven't really aged very well. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Like I said, Sai probably the best win, but not exactly something great. And then I mentioned it there, the win over Dustin Stolfus. Not a great win. Dustin Stolfus was 1-3 at the UFC prior to fighting Abus. His only win was against Dwight Grant, if you go look at Stolfus's resume. And Dwight Grant got released after that fight, right? Because there was such a bad showing that they released him. He's 1-3. Kyle Dawkins hasn't aged well. Kyle doesn't in the UFC. Vieira, I'll give him that. Gerald Meerschaert still sticks around, but was submitted in that fight too. So again, Dustin Stolfus, not a great opponent as far as that goes. And MMA math isn't everything, but like I said, I want to cover every little angle here as well. And going into this fight, he's got a bit of a layoff. So that Dustin Stolfus fight, people forget, was back in September. Going into the Sean Strickland fight here in July, there's going to be a 301-day layoff going into that fight. So again, Strickland's been more active, fought last in January as well. He's had, you look at it here, he's had a couple fights that did not go according to plan. So he's supposed to fight Gerald Meerschaert in December of 2021. He withdrew from that fight. Couldn't figure out why. Not sure if it was visa related. Supposed to fight this guy here. Not going to butcher the last name here, but he had to withdraw from that one. I'm not sure, again, the reason for that. Muradov, he ended up withdrawing from that fight. I think there was an injury there. So he fights Dustin Stolfus instead. Stoltzfus. I don't know what happened with the Gerald Meerschaert fight. They're saying visa issues here. Meerschaert was ready to fight him, though. I did an interview with him. Again, if you Google it, I think I have it on my UFC playlist. He was surprised that they didn't rebook that fight. And then the Muradov fight again, there was another injury there. So again, I don't blame him for the fact that opponents have been turning him down here, but also a lot of these withdrawals are his fault, right? It just sort of says it there. Abus obviously hasn't had any close fights in the UFC because he's only had the one fight, which ended in 19 seconds. And obviously his stats are a little inflated here, but we got to bring them up anyways, right? Check this out. 22, his significant strikes per minute is 22. You won't see that with anyone else because it's just such a small sample size. It was 19 seconds, but in those 19 seconds, he did quite well here. Look at the striking accuracy, 100%, striking defense, 100%. Like Stoltzfus didn't even get a shot off and Abus just destroyed him. So these stats are a little irrelevant, but got to mention them anyways, as we said. Okay, we do not have odds for this fight yet. If I had to guess, I think Strickland will be the favorite. I don't think he'll be that big of a favorite. Again, there's a lot of hype on Abus going into this fight. So if I had to guess, I think Strickland will be like a minus 200, maybe minus 150 even. I could see that, being a little bit closer for comfort. But if you look on Tapology, and we're going to bring this up here, majority of people are picking Strickland, 75% compared to 25% for Abus Magomedov. Now look, there's a lot of things we got to point out in this fight. Number one, Abus has knockout power. If you look at his wins, 56% of his wins are by knockout, but it's easier said than done. Sean Strickland, I want to point out, he's only lost via TKO twice. One was against Zaleski at welterweight, which I think a lot of that had to do with the weight cut. And then he got knocked out by Alex Pereira. Last time I checked, Alex Pereira, one of the heaviest hitters in MMA, period. I mean, he might even be knocking guys out at 205. We don't even know that yet. So, and Strickland did the worst thing you could do in that fight, which was, he was like, I remember him in the press conference leading into that fight. He's like, I don't think glory kickboxers are very good. I'm paraphrasing here, obviously, but he's like, I think MMA fighters are just as good as glory kickboxers. Well, he found out the hard way. He ended up on the canvas in that one. I would argue Alex Pereira has more power than Abus Magomedov. I know there'll be people fighting me on that, but that's, something I have to point out here. So kind of what I'm getting at here, Strickland's tough to take out. And if you even look at a guy that he fought in his in 2 fights ago, Sean Strickland fought Jared Cannonier. Cannonier's got knockout power. We saw him finish, Jack Hermanson. We saw him finish Derek Brunson. Wasn't able to knock out Strickland. So again, I think we can say that Strickland, it's not like he has a bad chin or anything. So while I do think Abus has a puncher's chance in this fight, it's probably not likely. I think Sean Strickland's going to win a decision here. 46% of Strickland's victories are by decision. He doesn't finish a lot. We saw him finish Brendan Allen. Maybe that happens here with it being a 5-round fight. And that's another key thing in this matchup. This is a 5-round fight. Strickland's had that experience. Abus has not. 20% of Abus's wins have been by decision. He's never gone 5 rounds. He's never even really been out of the second or third round or first round even in a lot of his fights. So how's he going to look? How's his cardio going to look? That's a big question mark. He's only got the one UFC fight. That's a big question mark. His level of opposition isn't that great. That's a big question mark. Again, I'll quickly go over who Strickland's fought compared to Abus, and it's not even close. Brendan Allen, Uriah Hall, Jack Hermanson, Nasser Nimimov, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Kamaru Usman, Alex Pereira, Jared Cannonier. Those all are notable opponents. They're a lot better than Danilo Villafort, Anderson Goncalves, etc. Yeah, so like I said, it's a 5-round fight. I think Strickland probably goes out there, wins this fight. I think it's going to be similar to the Jack Hermanson fight where, well, actually, I won't even say it's going to be similar that way. I just think that Strickland's going to win a decision like he did in that fight. I think Abus might get a shot in or two, but I think Sean Strickland's chin is going to hold up enough. They're giving Strickland a lot of money. He's one of these guys who will fight anyone, so that's why he's taking this fight. But this is a fight that is going to be way too big of a step up here for Abus. And like I said, he's got a puncher's chance. Would not surprise me if he does pull this off. But looking at the data here, I don't think he'll be able to knock out Strickland. And I think Strickland's going to be way better conditioned for 5 rounds than Abus is. And I think he wins a decision here. So that's what I'm going to go with, is Sean Strickland winning a decision here, 5 rounds on July 1st. Got to mention the obvious here, because I've already seen people upset with my video where I talked about Abus getting this fight, and I still stand by it. This fight doesn't make any sense. They could have done Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. They could have done Paulo Costa and Sean Strickland. There were a lot of matchups that they could have put together, but because the UFC does too many events, this is what we're getting, is this fight. It's an interesting fight. We're going to know how good Abus is in this fight. I think from that perspective, I'm intrigued, but I think Sean Strickland probably wins this. I'll just mention this point, because anytime I talk about Dagestani fighters, I get called racist. I get called all these different names. If you are going to put that in the comments, I'm going to tell you this right now. You're getting blocked. I'm not entertaining any of that at all. It's my channel. I don't have to put up with ridiculous conspiracies about why I'm picking Sean Strickland over Abus. I gave you all the data here. I explained why Sean Strickland will win this fight. I explained why Abus does not have a lot of advantages in this fight. Take that, get rid of the identity stuff, get rid of the discrimination, all this different stuff. Like I said, if I see any of that here on this video, you're getting blocked. It's as simple as that. I don't even want to entertain a thought of that with you, because to me, you're not living in the same reality I'm in. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, @Lynch on Sports. Let me know if there's any other fights you want me to preview. I got a couple of these coming out in the next little bit. I'm James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.